In this video, we'll talk about the last kind of JavaScript data that we're going to be using, and we're going to implement a deck of cards using this data type. The data types we've already seen are Booleans, numbers, and strings, and so those are the basic data types. And then we saw arrays, which have some special properties around order, and they can contain any other kind of data type. And then we're going to see this next data type, objects, which, like arrays, can hold inside any other data type, but have some different properties to them. So we're going to be looking at how objects can hold data inside and what we're going to use them for. When talking about the different data types and what we're using them for at a high level in our programs, these are representations of the kinds of data that we want to hold in our programs. So Booleans for a true or false value, numbers for things that we do math operations on, strings for long sets of characters, and arrays for things that we want to have dynamic length or imply order. And objects also fall into a specific category of data that we want to model. If an array is a set of similar kinds of data, so not just JavaScript data types, but they're all days of the week or letters of the alphabet or user guesses, then a single object is a set of heterogeneous data of different types. So numbers or strings or simply different kinds of data. And those are identified by fields. The idea of a heterogeneous set of data is something that most people have seen before. So a single line in a spreadsheet is one object. It has different fields, and each field contains a different kind of data. So a web address, a number of years, a country, a number of dollars. And each of these pieces of information together combine into something that represents a single thing, like a company. Another representation could be an address book, where each individual entry, a person or a single address for a person, is represented by a name, a street, a phone number, etc. Let's take a look at the syntax for objects. We're going to create a single line in an address book, or a single entry. An object begins with a curly brace. So this is unlike a block. It's unlike beginning a function or a conditional or a loop. This is the beginning of the type of data. So this is more analogous to a square bracket in an array. So once I have the curly brace, then I want to give the name of the field. So I'm going to start with name, and then a colon, and then I can give the value. So my name, and then I can give a second field, and then a third field, and then when I'm done, I can give a closing curly brace. So notice how the different fields have different JavaScript data types in them. And that's because the data inside my object is heterogeneous, so it's not all the same type of field. So let's look at how we can access each of the values inside this object. So if I want to access a single string, let's say the name, then I can say dot and then the name of the field. I can also use square brackets with the object and give the name inside of a string. During this course, we're not going to be dealing with any kind of real-world data like an address, but we are going to be dealing with cards. So next, let's see why an object is an ideal representation for a card inside of our JavaScript program. So first of all, let's deal with the deck of cards. So this is all the set of cards that our program is going to deal with. And this is an array. So an array implies order. An array contains the same kind of data. So we're going to take an array and we're going to put a bunch of objects inside. So for each individual card, what kind of data does this card contain? So we said we needed a deck of cards, this array of card objects, and that implies some order and some things like there's 52 cards. What about an individual card? What kind of data do we need to hold in there, and what kind of logic is that data going to enable? So within most games of cards, the cards are being compared against each other. So in order to do that comparison, in order to differentiate the cards from each other, what kind of information do the cards need to hold? If I were to create an object that represents a single card, then I would have to think about what fields I want inside this object. So to begin with, I could just start with the simple case of name field and then putting the entire name of the card in this field, like 2 of hearts. So I know that for all the cards in my deck, I'm eventually going to want to compare them to each other. So right now, my name doesn't allow me to do that. I don't have enough information to compare this card against any other card. What I want is probably something like a number, and this will allow me to do the Boolean operation on this card versus another card, like the 3 of hearts. However, this starts to break down when we get to the face cards, because the face cards don't have numbers, but they still have a rank within the suit. So actually, we could say that this one is 12. So maybe rank is a better name for this field. Another feature of my system of representing cards and deck of cards is that I need to decide beforehand the fields that I have in each of my objects. And they all need to be the same. So obviously it wouldn't make any sense for me to change the spelling of rank or to call this field card name and the other field just name. So I just need to standardize this in a way that I think is going to be most convenient for accessing the information inside the card. So I already said that rank, I want to be a number so that I can do Boolean less than or greater than operations. I also think that it would be nice to have a separate field for the suit of the card, and then have the name only be the title of the card. The next thing is that every single card game that we're going to create relies on the fact that when the game starts, the cards in the deck are in a random order. So before we begin to implement the actual logic of a card game, we need to make sure that the cards in the deck are shuffled. So we're going to talk through the logic of being able to take this deck and reorder the cards inside. I've copied the card shuffling function from the Git book into the script.js. So let's walk through how this function works. It's not super important that you understand 100% each step. You can pretty much rely on the fact that this function is going to shuffle the deck for you, but let's see how it works. Inside this function is a loop that visits every single card. And each iteration of the loop begins with getting a random card in the deck. So this is a second random card, where we've already identified the first card by the index, or the place inside the loop where the index points to in the array. The second thing it does is get the current card. So we have all of our sets of cards, and we're going to get one of the cards in the deck, and then we're also going to get some random card. Then the random card and the current card switch places. So that's these two lines here. So we're taking the card out of the deck here, and then we're switching them around here. So this one goes here, and this one goes here. And then the loop moves on. So it visits every single location in the deck and does a switch with a random card. And at the end, when it's done, it just gives the array back. Let's create a simple card game where the computer draws one card from the deck and the player draws one card from the deck, and whoever's card is higher is the winner. I copied my main function, my shuffle deck function, my get random index function, and my array of card objects deck variable into my script.js. And so now let's implement our card game. I'm going to begin inside the main function by creating a shuffled deck of cards. And then I'm going to have the computer draw a card. And I can represent the idea of drawing a card by using the pop function. And this is going to permanently take a card out of the array from the end of the array. And pop always takes out from the end of the array in order. So it's as if I was drawing from the top of the deck. The cards are already in a random order. So next I'm going to draw the player card. Now I need my logic to compare the two cards. So I need, just like the dice game, I'm going to start the card game by default in a losing state. And then I'm going to have a conditional. And if that conditional is true, then the player wins. And I want to compare my two cards. So if the computer card is less than the player card, then the player wins. But I can't just make this Boolean comparison directly because both of these values inside the variable are objects. But I did make sure that inside the object is a piece of data that I can use to make a comparison. So that's the rank field. So this should be the comparison. And my logic should be good. Now I want to output, I want to format the output so that I can see what the actual result was. Let's save this and see it in the browser. Now every time I click the submit button, I'm shuffling the deck, drawing two cards, and comparing them against each other. Let's see.